Uncle Hawk, please. He's going to come back. He always comes back. Those 6 words whispered through a cracked phone line at 2:47 in the morning made a man who had survived war's prison and the worst this country had to offer freeze completely. A 14-year-old girl was lying broken in a hospital bed in Albuquerque, and the man who put her there carried a badge. If this story moves you, hit subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now let's go. Tom Daniels had not cried since the day they put Jake Morrison in the ground. That was 16 years ago. Jake had been 26. Tom had been 28. They'd grown up 2 houses apart on the same crack street in Tucson, Arizona, shared a first beer behind the same dumpster, gotten their first tattoos from the same guy who charged $30 and used a needle that was probably not as clean as it should have been. They had been closer than brothers. In fact, Tom had always believed that the word brothers didn't quite cover it. Jake was the part of him that believed the world could still be good. So when Jake came home from his 3rd deployment, walking differently quieter, like something behind his eyes had gone out, Tom didn't push. He just showed up. Every Tuesday, every single Tuesday for 2 years, he pulled up to Jake's house on his bike, knocked twice, and sat with the man on his porch until Jake was ready to talk, or ready to not talk, whichever he needed. It was on one of those Tuesdays that Jake had grabbed his arm, not casually, the way a man grabs something when he's afraid of what happens if he lets go. Hawk, yeah, I need you to promise me something. Tom hadn't liked the way Jake looked that afternoon. There was something in his voice that sounded like a man who was already organizing his affairs. He'd heard that voice before. He'd heard it from his own father the month before his heart gave out. Jake, don't just listen. Lily, my daughter, she's 4 years old, and she doesn't understand anything yet, but she will someday. And when she does, I need to know that if something goes wrong, if I'm not around somebody who knows what real loyalty looks like, is watching out for her. Tom had shifted in his chair. Nothing's going to go wrong. Jake had looked at him with the patience of a man who has already accepted something Tom hadn't. Promise me anyway. Fine, I promise. You happy now? Jake had leaned back, let out a long breath, and nodded slowly. Yeah, I'm happy now. 3 weeks later, Jake Morrison was dead. Massive cardiac event at 30 years old. The doctors said his heart had been silently failing for months, likely compounded by stress and undiagnosed trauma from overseas. He died in his sleep on a Wednesday morning, which Tom always thought was deeply unfair because Tuesdays were supposed to be their day. At the funeral, Tom had looked at 4-year-old Lily Morrison in her little black dress, holding a flower she didn't know what to do with, and he had felt the weight of the promise he'd made settle into his chest like a stone. But promises are easy to keep in theory. They become complicated when life moves on, when distance grows, when the woman Jake had loved a soft-voiced woman named Carol married again. A man named Daniel. Daniel Morrison, no relation, who wore his police uniform like it was a second skin and smiled the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. Tom had met Daniel once at a birthday party Lily's grandmother had organized when Lily was 6. He had shaken the man's hand and felt nothing good about it. But Carol had seemed happy, or at least she had seemed like a woman trying hard to be happy, which Tom understood was sometimes the same thing. He had told himself it wasn't his place. He had told himself Jake would understand. He had spent 16 years telling himself those 2 things, and he had almost started to believe them. Almost. The phone rang at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday in October. Tom was awake. He was almost always awake at that hour. Too many years of riding night roads had permanently reset his internal clock, but he was sitting quietly in his kitchen in Tucson, drinking coffee that had gone cold, not doing much of anything. The phone screen lit up with a number he didn't recognize, a New Mexico area code. He almost let it go to voicemail. He didn't know why he answered. He never answered unknown numbers at 2 a.m. But something, call it instinct, call it Jake's ghost, poking him in the ribs, made him pick it up. Hello. Silence, then breathing, then Uncle Hawk. The voice was small, fractured, like someone speaking through a mouthful of broken glass. Tom sat up straight, so fast the coffee cup rattled. Who is this? It's Lily. Lily Morrison. The stone in his chest that had been sitting there for 16 years suddenly weighed about 1,000 pounds. Lily, his voice came out rough. Lily, where are you? What's wrong? Her breath hitched. He could hear the pain in it, Physical pain, not just emotional. I'm at University Hospital in Albuquerque. They said my ribs are broken and my wrist, she stopped, swallowed. He told them I fell down the stairs. Tom's hand tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. He. It wasn't a question. Daniel. A pause. My stepfather. The kitchen was very quiet for a moment. Tom could hear his own heartbeat. Slow, measured, the way it always got when something serious was happening, not faster, not louder, but heavier. Like his body understood that panic was a luxury he could not afford right now. How long has this been going on, he asked. Another long silence. The kind that tells you everything before a single word is spoken. Lily. A long time, she whispered. Tom closed his eyes. "'Kay," he said, and his voice was steady because he needed it to be. "'Kay. Are you alone in the room right now?" The nurse just left. Daniel went to get food. He'll be back in maybe 20 minutes. "Are you safe for the next 20 minutes?" "I think so. The nurses won't let him in when they're doing their rounds. But Uncle Hawk," her voice cracked completely on the last syllable. "Please, he's going to come back. He always comes back." Tom was already standing. He was already moving. His mind had shifted into a gear that most people who knew him recognized and most people who didn't recognize and feared. "Listen to me very carefully," he said. "You tell the nurses you do not want to see him. You tell them you're afraid. You use those exact words, 'I am afraid of my stepfather.' Can you do that? What if they don't believe me? Then you say it again, and you keep saying it. You do not let him in that room, and Lily. Yeah, you did the right thing calling me. You hear me. You did exactly right." There was a sound on the other end that might have been a sob or might have been relief. It was hard to tell the difference when someone had been holding everything in for a very long time. "I didn't know who else to call," she said. "There's nobody else you needed to call," Tom told her. "I'm coming." He hung up and stood in his kitchen for exactly 4 seconds to let the weight of what had just happened land fully on his shoulders, and then he started making calls. The first call went to Marcus Webb. Marcus was the kind of lawyer people in Tom's world called when things were serious. Not the kind who worked out of glass towers and billed by the hour to rich clients. Marcus worked out of a cluttered office in South Tucson and had spent 20 years fighting cases the system tried hard to lose. He was 61 years old, wore the same 3 sport coats on rotation, and had never, in Tom's memory, turned down a call that came in before dawn. He picked up on the second ring. "Talk to me," Marcus said. Tom talked. He kept it short, precise, the way Jake had always said Tom communicated best, like a man who respects both his own time and yours. When he finished, there was a brief silence on Marcus's end. "She's 14, yes. And the stepfather is law enforcement. Albuquerque PD. She said he's well connected." "Of course he is." Marcus's voice had that particular flatness it got when he was already building something in his head. "I can get emergency custody paperwork filed by morning if we have a cooperative physician at that hospital willing to document the injuries independently, meaning without the stepfather present during examination. Tell me what you need. I need you not to go in there and do something that gives him grounds to have you removed before we can file." Tom exhaled through his nose. "I'm not going to do anything stupid, Marcus. I know you're not going to do anything stupid. I'm saying don't do anything that looks stupid in a courtroom. There's a difference." "Understood. I'll meet you there. Drive safe, Tom." The second call went to a man named Ricky Bricks Torres, who served as Tom's sergeant-at-arms and had the organizational instincts of a military commander wrapped inside the frame of a former linebacker. Tom explained the situation in under 2 minutes. Ricky was quiet for a moment. Then, "How many do you want?" "As many as will come. Give me an hour." The third call Tom made was to nobody. He sat down, opened the old cigar box he kept on the top shelf of his kitchen cabinet, the one with Jake's photograph taped to the inside of the lid, and he sat with it for a moment. Jake Morrison at 22, grinning in front of his first bike, squinting into a summer sun that no longer existed. "I'm late," Tom said quietly to the photograph. "I know I'm late, but I'm going." He closed the box, put on his jacket, and walked out to his bike. By 4:15 a.m., there were 11 bikes idling in the parking lot behind Tom's garage. By 5 a.m., there were 34. By 5:45, when the sky had gone from black to the bruised purple gray that precedes a desert dawn, there were 97. They had come from Tucson, from Phoenix, from Flagstaff. Two men had driven up from El Paso. One, a retired Army surgeon named Dr. Carl Eisman Reeves, who had been in Tom's circle for 30 years, had driven 4 hours from Santa Fe and arrived with a black bag that contained, among other things, the kind of documentation expertise that hospitals respond to when someone knows how to ask the right questions in the right language. They were not all what the world expected when it heard the word biker. There was a high school history teacher named Dennis who had ridden with Tom's chapter for 12 years. There was a man named Arturo who ran a construction company and coached youth baseball on weekends. There was a woman named Sandra who had joined after her own experience with a system that had failed to protect her daughter a decade ago and who had never left because, as she put it, these people showed up when nobody else would. Not one of them had been asked twice. Tom walked the line slowly the way he always did before a ride that mattered. Not inspecting, acknowledging, looking each person in the eye. There is a kind of communication that happens between people who have chosen to trust each other completely that requires no words at all. He felt it moving through the line like a current. When he reached the end, he turned to face them all. "I'm going to say this once," he said, and his voice carried in the pre-dawn quiet. "This isn't a confrontation. We are not going to the hospital to fight. We are going because a 14-year-old girl is lying in a bed 600 miles from here, and she needs to know that she is not alone in this world. We stand outside. We stand clean. We let the lawyers do the legal work and the doctors do the medical work. What we do is we be present. We be visible. We make sure everyone in that building understands that this girl has people. Real people. People who aren't going anywhere." Nobody spoke. "But I want to be absolutely clear about one more thing." Tom paused. His voice dropped just slightly, and somehow that made it carry further. "If that man, badge or no badge, attempts to get to that girl while we are standing there, he will learn very quickly that a piece of metal pinned to a shirt does not make you untouchable. We do this right. We do this legal. But we do not back down." 97 engines answered him. About him. 620 miles is a long road when you are riding with purpose. Tom rode at the front, which was his place, but he didn't feel like a leader for most of those miles. He felt like a man doing penance. He ran through the years in his head, all the Christmases he had sent a card but not made the drive, all the birthdays he had thought about but let pass. He had heard through Carol's mother that Lily was doing well in school. He had told himself that was enough. He had told himself that Carol had built a new life and it wasn't his place to complicate it. He had told himself a lot of things. "I didn't know," said the voice in his head that was always trying to defend him. "You didn't ask," answered the other one. He rode harder. It was just past noon when they crossed into New Mexico. The desert stretched wide and silent around them, and the convoy stretched behind Tom like a long shadow. At a fuel stop outside Socorro, a woman pumping gas had stood and stared at the 97 bikes lined up in perfect formation, and then she had started clapping. Slowly at first, then harder. Tom had nodded at her and kept moving. They were 40 miles outside Albuquerque when Tom's phone rang through his helmet speaker. It was Marcus. "I need you to know something before you get here," Marcus said without preamble. "Tell me." "Daniel Morrison made a call this morning, an hour after Lily was admitted. He called the deputy chief of Albuquerque PD, who is his former supervisor and his current personal friend." Tom felt the muscle in his jaw tighten. "How do you know that?" "Because I have a contact in the department who doesn't like dirty laundry sitting around. There are 2 patrol units sitting in the hospital parking lot right now. They're technically there for security." His security. "That's my read, yes." Tom was quiet for 3 full seconds. "Then can we still file the emergency custody petition?" "Already filed. 20 minutes ago. Judge Renata Cortez is reviewing it. She's good, Tom. She's one of the honest ones. But it won't be heard until tomorrow morning at the earliest, which means right now, technically, Daniel Morrison is still Lily's legal guardian. So he can still walk into that room. Unless the hospital staff refuses him entry on grounds of patient safety, which requires a formal request from the patient herself, which you told me she already made. She did. and which is currently being evaluated by the hospital's patient advocate. It is a process, Tom. It takes time. And I know that's not what you want to hear. Tom looked at the road ahead. 40 miles, 35 minutes. Is she still safe right now? Last I heard, yes. The nursing staff on her floor has been, shall we say, strategically slow in processing his visitor requests. Good people, Tom said quietly. Good people, Marcus agreed. Now listen, when you get there, park. Stay outside. Let me go in first. The moment you and 96 of your closest friends walk through that door, the optics change. We need the story to be about Lily, not about the Hells Angels converging on a hospital. Do you understand me? I understand you. A beat. Tom. Yeah. You're doing the right thing. I know I'm the voice of legal caution here, but I want you to know you are doing the right thing. Tom swallowed. 16 years too late. She's still alive, Marcus said simply. That means it's not too late. So they parked in a wide formation in the hospital's outer lot, 97 bikes in perfect rows, engines cutting off one by one until the silence came down like something solid. Tom sat on his bike for a moment after everyone else had dismounted. He looked at the building. 5 stories. Beige concrete, fluorescent lights visible behind blinds on the 3rd floor. Somewhere up there, Jake Morrison's daughter was lying in a hospital bed with broken ribs and a fractured wrist, and the man who had done it was somewhere in the same building, wearing a badge and waiting for the world to look away. Tom had let the world look away once before. He wasn't going to let it happen again. He climbed off his bike, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the entrance. Behind him, without a word of instruction, 96 people formed a line and followed. The lobby of University Hospital went still, the way a room goes still when something fundamentally unexpected enters it. Tom walked calmly. His boots were quiet on the linoleum. He went straight to the front desk where a young man with a visitor badge and a slightly panicked expression was reaching for a phone. Sir, I'm going to need... My name is Tom Daniels, Tom said in the even unhurried voice he used when he needed to communicate that he was not a man who needed to raise his voice. I am here to see Lily Morrison, room 314. I am listed as emergency contact on file as of this morning. I have legal counsel present and documentation of my authorization. I am not here to cause a problem. I am here because a child asked me to come. The young man blinked. His hand was still on the phone but not dialing. Behind Tom, the lobby was full of leather and quiet purpose. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They simply stood there, filling the space the way a wall fills a space, not threatening, not advancing. Just present, immovably, undeniably present. A charge nurse appeared from a side hallway. Mid-50s, silver hair, the expression of a woman who had handled every variety of hospital drama and was not easily rattled. She looked at Tom. She looked at the lobby. She looked back at Tom. Mr. Daniels, she said carefully. Ma'am. She studied him for a long moment. Then she looked past him at the 96 people standing silently in her lobby, and Tom watched something cross her face, not fear, not irritation. Something closer to recognition. The kind of recognition a person has when they have been waiting for the balance to tip in the right direction and they are watching it tip. Room 314 is on the 3rd floor, she said. Visiting hours policy requires... I know, Tom said. I'll go alone. My people will wait here. She looked at him steadily. She asked for you? Yes, ma'am. Another pause. Then the charge nurse straightened slightly as though a decision had been quietly made. Follow me, she said. And Tom Daniels walked toward the elevator, carrying 16 years of a broken promise on his back and a 14-year-old girl's terrified voice in his chest, and the absolute unwavering certainty that this time, he was not going to look away. The elevator doors opened on the 3rd floor, and Tom stepped out into a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fluorescent light and the particular kind of quiet that exists only in hospitals at midday. Not peaceful, just held. Like everyone on the floor was collectively holding their breath. The charge nurse, whose name badge read Patricia Nunez, RN, walked beside him with the brisk efficiency of a woman who had made her decision and was not going to second-guess it. She did not make small talk. Tom appreciated that. They were halfway down the hall when a door opened ahead of them and a man stepped out. Tom recognized him immediately. Daniel Morrison was taller than Tom remembered, broader through the shoulders. He was in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a gray button-down, but he carried himself the way men in law enforcement carry themselves even when they're off duty, like the badge is stitched into the muscle rather than clipped to the shirt. He had a paper coffee cup in one hand and a phone in the other, and when he looked up and saw Tom, everything about him changed in the space of a single breath. The coffee cup stayed level, but his eyes went flat and hard the way eyes do when a man is recalibrating very fast. "Tom Daniels," he said, not a greeting, a calculation. "Daniel," Tom said. They stood in the hallway 6 feet apart, and neither of them moved, and the charge nurse stopped walking and stood very still reading the room the way experienced nurses read rooms, which is with the accuracy of someone who has seen exactly what unchecked tension turns into. "You have no business being here," Daniel said. His voice was controlled, professionally controlled. The voice of a man who had spent years learning how to sound calm while meaning something else entirely. "I'm on the emergency contact list," Tom said. "As of this morning." Something flickered behind Daniel's eyes. "You can't just—" "My attorney filed the paperwork at 8:45 a.m. You're welcome to verify it with the front desk." Tom paused for exactly one beat. "Or with the judge who received it." Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at Patricia Nunez, and Tom watched the look he gave her, sharp, proprietary, the look of a man who expected the people around him to fall in line. "This man has no legal authority over my stepdaughter." Patricia Nunez looked back at him with the expression of a woman who had also spent years learning to read the difference between authority and the performance of authority. "Mr. Daniels has been cleared for visitation by the patient advocate on the basis of a direct request from the patient," she said. Her voice was the voice of a woman who had made her choice and had no intention of being moved. "Sir, if you'd like to speak with administration about visiting rights, the office is on the first floor." "I am her legal guardian." "The office is on the first floor," Patricia repeated. The hallway was very quiet. Daniel looked at Tom for a long moment. Tom looked back. He did not look away. He did not shift his weight. He simply stood there and let Daniel Morrison read whatever he wanted to read in his face, because what was written there was not aggression, and it was not fear, and it was not negotiation. It was something much simpler and much harder to argue with. It was the face of a man who has decided. Daniel made a sound low in his throat, not quite a word, not quite anything else, and turned and walked toward the elevator. Tom watched him go. Then he followed Patricia Nunez to the door of room 314. She knocked twice gently and pushed it open. "Lily, honey, someone's here to see you." She stepped back and let Tom go in alone. He had been prepared for bad. He had not been fully prepared for what 14 years of bad looks like on a 14-year-old girl. Lily Morrison was small in the hospital bed, small in the way people get when pain has been folding them inward for years. Her right wrist was in a splint. Her face carried the careful stillness of someone who has learned that certain expressions cause certain reactions. But her eyes were Jake's, dark brown, direct, the kind of eyes that don't look away from things. They found Tom immediately, and something in them broke open. "Uncle Hawk," she said, and her voice was 14 years old and 4 years old at the same time. Tom crossed the room and pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down in it and took her uninjured hand in both of his. He didn't say anything right away. Sometimes the right thing to say requires a few seconds to locate. "Hey, kiddo," he said finally. Lily let out a breath that sounded like it had been waiting a very long time to leave her body. "You actually came." "Of course I came. I wasn't sure." She stopped, swallowed. "I didn't know if you'd remember who I was." That landed in Tom's chest like something physical. He kept his face steady, but inside he felt the full weight of everything those words contained, not accusation, which would have been easier, but the simple, devastating resignation of a kid who had learned not to expect people to show up. "I remember exactly who you are," he said. "You are Jake Morrison's daughter, and you called the right person." Her chin trembled slightly. She pressed her lips together and got it under control the way someone does, who has had a lot of practice not crying in front of people. "He's going to be so angry," she said. "When he finds out I called you, he's not going to do anything to you," Tom said, quietly. "Absolutely. That's done. Do you understand me?" That part is over. She looked at him and he could see her trying to believe it. Not the dramatic, sudden belief of someone hearing good news, but the slow, cautious, terrified belief of someone who has been disappointed so many times that hope feels like a trap. You don't know him, she said. I know what he's afraid of, Tom replied. And right now, he's figuring it out. Yeah. 3 floors down in the hospital lobby, Daniel Morrison walked out of the elevator and stopped. The lobby was full, not chaotic full, not loud full the way a room is full when people fill it intentionally, shoulder to shoulder, completely still. 96 people in leather and worn denim who had ridden 600 miles and were now standing in a hospital lobby with the patient, immovable presence of people who have nowhere else they need to be. Nobody moved toward him. Nobody said a word. They simply stood there and they looked at him, and the collective weight of that many eyes on one man at one time is something that cannot be fully described, only experienced. Daniel stopped walking. To his right, 2 uniformed patrol officers who had been stationed near the entrance had gone very still as well, and neither of them appeared to be in any hurry to insert themselves into whatever was happening. A man detached from the group and walked toward Daniel. 60-something sport coat, reading glasses, pushed up on his forehead, carrying a file folder the way a man carries a weapon with complete ease and complete intention. Marcus Webb stopped 4 feet from Daniel Morrison and extended a hand. Mr. Morrison, Marcus Webb, I'm legal counsel retained on behalf of Lily Morrison's emergency protective custody petition. I believe you've been informed of the filing. Daniel did not take the hand. I know who you are. Good, that saves us time. Marcus lowered the hand without embarrassment. I want to be straightforward with you. The petition was filed this morning with Judge Renata Cortez. It includes the attending physician's independent injury assessment, which documents a pattern of trauma inconsistent with the reported mechanism of injury, the patient's own statement, and 6 prior incident reports that were filed with Albuquerque PD and closed without investigation. Judge Cortez will hear the matter tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Something moved through Daniel's face, fast and then carefully controlled. 6 reports. 6, Marcus said pleasantly. It turns out paperwork has a long memory, even when the people who filed it don't. Those reports were closed, yes. The question a judge tends to find interesting is who closed them and why, but that's a conversation for tomorrow. Marcus tilted his head slightly. Tonight I would strongly encourage you to stay in a hotel rather than attempting further contact with your stepdaughter. I say this not as a threat, but as genuinely well-meaning legal advice from one adult to another. Daniel's voice when it came was very low. You have no idea who you're dealing with. No, Marcus agreed, but I think looking around this room, you might be in the process of developing a clearer idea of who you're dealing with. Daniel looked at the lobby again. 96 people who had not moved, who were not going to move, who had a combined stillness that was louder than anything he could have shouted. He looked back at Marcus. His expression had gone somewhere complicated, somewhere between fury and the first faint, unwilling recognition that the ground had shifted beneath him. He turned and walked out of the hospital. Upstairs in room 314, Tom's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Marcus, he's leaving the building. Tom let out a breath he had not realized he'd been holding. Lily watched his face. What? He's gone for now, Tom said. My attorney is here. We have legal proceedings in motion. You're safe tonight. She absorbed this slowly, like someone allowing themselves to believe in warmth after a very long time in the cold. Then there are people downstairs, aren't there? It wasn't a question. Yes, Tom said. How many at 96? She stared at him. 96 people came here for me. For you. The silence that followed was the kind that has a lot happening inside it. Lily looked down at her lap. Her good hand gripped the edge of the blanket. When she looked back up, her eyes were bright, and she was doing that thing again. The careful pressing of her lips, the controlled breath. But this time she lost the battle just slightly, and 2 tears escaped before she pulled herself back. I never told anybody, she said quietly. For years I didn't tell anybody. My mom, she stopped. Tom waited. My mom used to say he didn't mean it, that he was under pressure from work, that if she shook her head. She stopped saying that eventually. She stopped saying a lot of things. About 2 years ago, she just got quiet, And then last year she got sick and she went to the hospital and they said it was her heart, but she stopped again. Her jaw worked. Lily, Sam, Tom said carefully. What are you telling me? She looked at him directly. Those dark eyes, Jake's eyes, completely clear and completely terrified. I'm telling you, I don't think her heart just stopped by itself, she said. And I'm telling you that the night she died, Daniel came home at 2 a.m. and his shirt was wet, and I asked him why, and he said he'd been at the hospital, but the hospital told me later he hadn't signed in until almost 3. The room was very quiet. Tom felt something cold move through him, slow and deliberate, like ice water, finding its way into spaces he hadn't known were open. Did you tell anyone this? Who was I going to? He might have to tell he's a cop. His friends are cops. The last time I tried to tell my school counselor something was wrong at home, she called him. He came to pick me up from school, and on the way home, her voice cut off. He explained to me why that was a mistake. Tom's hand tightened slightly around hers. He caught himself and consciously relaxed the grip. She didn't need to feel anything else close around her. You're going to tell me everything, he said. All of it, but not right now. Right now, a doctor is going to come in here and do a proper examination, and there will be documentation and everything. You tell me you are going to tell in the right place at the right time so that it matters, so that it sticks. What if it doesn't stick? Then we try again, Tom said, and again, until it does. Lily looked at him for a long moment. My dad used to talk about you, she said. I barely remember him. I was only 4, but I remember he said you were the only person he knew who didn't know how to quit. Tom felt the back of his throat tighten in a way that surprised him. Your dad, he said, was a man who saw things clearly. Dr. Carl Reeves arrived at room 314 at 2:20 p.m. with his black bag and his 30 years of medical experience and a very specific kind of professional calm that came from having spent a significant portion of his career documenting injuries and field conditions where documentation was the only justice available. He introduced himself to Lily with the unhurried, respectful manner of a man who understood that a patient is not a file, she is a person who has agreed to let you near her, and that agreement needs to be earned fresh every single time. I'm not going to push you to do anything you are not comfortable with, he told her. We go at your pace. You say stop, we stop. You understand? Lily looked at him, then she looked at Tom. Tom nodded. Okay, she said. Tom stepped out into the hallway while Carl conducted the examination. He stood by the window at the end of the hall and looked out and thought about Jake Morrison at 22, grinning in a photograph in a cigar box, and about what it must have cost a 4-year-old girl to carry her father's absence alongside everything else she'd been carrying. His phone buzzed. Ricky. Updates, Ricky said. She's being examined now. Morrison left the building. Temporarily. Yeah. We had a development out here, Ricky said. About 20 minutes after Morrison walked out, a news van pulled up. Local affiliate. Someone called them at them. Tom straightened. Who? Nobody from us. My best guess, someone inside the hospital. One of the nurses, maybe. Whoever it was, it's not a bad thing, Hawk. Reporters started talking to Sandra. You know Sandra does not shut up when she gets going. Despite everything, Tom felt the corner of his mouth move. What did she say? She told them why we were here. Clean factual, no aggression. She mentioned that a 14-year-old girl had called for help and that help showed up. She said, and I'm quoting directly, we're not a story. The girl is the story. But if our being here makes sure she stays safe tonight, then we'll stand here all night. Tom was quiet for a moment. Good, he said. That's good. It gets more interesting, Ricky said. 20 minutes after the news van Morrison's patrol of her friends who were sitting in the lot they left. The cameras made them uncomfortable. Apparently. A pause. Also, Hawk, 3 more guys are en route from Colorado. They heard through the network. I told them they were welcome. They are. Total's going to be 100 by nightfall. Tom pressed his forehead briefly against the cool glass of the window. He was tired in the bone-deep way that has nothing to do with sleep. He was also something else, something he hadn't been in a very long time. Maybe not since the last Tuesday he'd sat on Jake Morrison's porch. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. Ricky, he said, yeah, make sure people eat. It's going to be a long night. Already on it. Arturo's brother runs a food truck. It's on its way. Tom shook his head slowly. Of course it is. Carl found him in the hallway 40 minutes later. The doctor's face was professionally composed, but his eyes told a more specific story, the eyes of a man who has seen something he expected to find, but wished he hadn't. The wrist fracture and the rib injuries are consistent with a significant impact event, Carl said in a low, even voice. Not consistent with a fall downstairs. The fracture pattern on the wrist is a defensive injury. She raised her arm to block something. Tom said nothing. There is also evidence of older healed trauma, at least 3 separate prior incidents that I can identify from the imaging. She's been dealing with this for years, Tom. Years. Can you document all of it? I'm already doing that in terms that will be unambiguous to any physician, any judge, and any jury. Thank you, Carl. Carl put a hand briefly on Tom's shoulder. She's a strong kid, he said. Remarkably strong. She's her father's daughter, Tom said. He went back to room 314. Lily was sitting up slightly, which was already more than she'd been managing when he arrived. The fear in her face hadn't gone. It was not the kind of fear that disappears in an afternoon, but it had changed shape. It was smaller, more contained, like something she was holding rather than something holding her. So what happens now? She asked. Tonight, you stay here and you're safe. The nurses on this floor are, let's just say they're paying close attention. My guys are downstairs and they're not leaving. Tomorrow morning, there's a hearing. And if the judge says he can take me back, she won't. But if, Lily, Tom leaned forward and looked at her directly. I made a promise to your father 16 years ago. I broke it by not being here sooner, and that is something I will carry. But I am here now, and I am not leaving, and there is not a judge, a lawyer, a deputy, chief, or anything else in this state that is going to put you back in that house. I need you to hear me when I say that. She heard him. He could see it, the slow, cautious, terrified allowance of belief settling into her face like light into a room that has been dark a long time. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Tom sat back. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Down below, somewhere in the parking lot, 96 people were eating food truck food and standing watch in the October afternoon, and a news camera was recording the image of 100 motorcycles parked in perfect formation outside a hospital, and somewhere in the city, a man with a badge was making calls to people he thought could still fix this. He was wrong about that. He just didn't know it yet. Tell me something about him, Lily said suddenly. Tom looked up. About who? My dad. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he settled back in his chair and the ghost of something that might have been a smile moved across his face. The first time I met your father, he said he was 11 years old and he was trying to convince me that he could outrun my bike on his bicycle, just pedaling flat out down the street, completely serious about it. Wouldn't quit. I had to actually start the engine and pull up next to him before he'd admit defeat, and even then he said the wind was against him. Lily laughed. It was small and surprised and immediately swallowed, like she had forgotten for a moment that laughing was something available to her. Then she looked startled by herself. Tom kept going. He was the most stubborn human being I ever met, which, he looked at her. Runs in the family, I see. She looked down, but she was still almost smiling. He would have... Tom started, then stopped, then started again because some sentences need a second attempt. He would have been so proud of you for making that call last night, for not giving up. He would have been so proud, Lily. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now, the kind that has warmth in it. Outside, the sun was beginning to angle toward evening, and in the lobby below, 100 people were keeping a promise that had been made 16 years ago and was finally irrevocably being kept. The food truck Arturo's brother drove was called Rosita's, and it served green chile cheeseburgers that were by general consensus the best thing that had happened to the hospital parking lot in its entire institutional history. By 6 p.m., the smell had drifted through the automatic doors, and at least 2 nurses on the second floor had sent someone outside to get them one. Nobody in the parking lot charged them. That was just how it went. Tom sat with Lily through dinner. She managed half a cup of soup and a few crackers, which was more than she'd eaten since she arrived, according to the day nurse, and he talked to her the way he used to talk to Jake on those Tuesday porches. Not performing conversation, just being present, letting the silences sit without filling them with noise. Occasionally she asked something and he answered honestly, and occasionally he asked something and she answered more than he expected, which told him she had been waiting a long time for someone to ask. It was around 7 o'clock when the October dark was coming down outside the window, and Lily's eyes were getting heavy from the pain medication that Tom's phone rang with a number he recognized as the hospital's main line. He stepped into the hallway. "Mr. Daniels." The voice was female professional, carefully neutral in the way that tells you the person is managing something. "This is Helen Park. I'm the hospital's patient advocate. I understand you have been with Miss Morrison this evening." "That's right. I want to keep you informed. We've received a formal request from an attorney representing Daniel Morrison, filed approximately 1 hour ago, challenging the patient's right to restrict his visitation on the grounds that he retains legal guardianship pending tomorrow's hearing." Tom felt his jaw tighten. "And our legal team is reviewing the challenge. I want to be transparent with you. Depending on how the review goes, we may be legally required to allow supervised access." A pause. "I want to emphasize the word supervised. He would not be alone with her. A hospital staff member would be present at all times." "He shouldn't be in that room at all," Tom said. "I agree with you personally, Mr. Daniels. I am telling you what the law may require us to do professionally." Another pause, more careful this time. "I'm calling you because I believe you have the right to know what we're navigating. I will call you again the moment our legal team makes a determination. It should be within the hour." Tom hung up and stood in the hallway and breathed. Then he called Marcus. Marcus answered mid-first ring. "I already know," he said. "Daniel retained Anthony Garces. He's a defense attorney who does a lot of work for the police union. He's good, Tom. He's very good." "Can he get Daniel into that room tonight?" "Possibly. Guardianship law is complicated. When there's a pending petition but no active protective order yet, the order doesn't exist until Judge Cortez issues it tomorrow. In the meantime, Daniel can make a credible legal argument that his rights as guardian supersede the patient's own request for restricted access, given that she's a minor." "She's a minor who he put in the hospital." "I know that. You know that. The hospital's attorneys are operating on what they can prove right now, tonight, which is not as much as we'd like." Marcus's voice was quick and tight, the voice of a man working several problems simultaneously. "I am filing an emergency motion right now to request an immediate temporary restraining order pending tomorrow's hearing. If I can get a judge to sign it tonight, and I mean tonight, not tomorrow, it supersedes everything Garces filed." "Which judge?" "I'm trying Renata Cortez first. She's already familiar with the case. If she's unreachable, I go to Judge Harrison, who is on call for emergency family matters tonight." A rapid sound of papers. "Tom, I need you to stay calm and stay in that building." "I'm calm." "You sound calm. I've known you 20 years. When you sound that calm, it means you're 3 seconds from doing something I'll have to explain to a courtroom." "I'm not going to do anything, Marcus." "Good, because the single most important thing you can do for Lily right now is nothing. Let the law work. That's what we built tonight. We built a legal case. We built documentation. We built witnesses. All of that falls apart the second this becomes something other than what it is." Tom looked at the door to the room 314. Through the small window in it, he could see Lily sleeping, her arm in its splint, resting on top of the blanket. She looked younger asleep. She looked like someone's child, which was what she was, what she had always been, what she deserved to have been treated as. "How long do you need?" Tom asked. "Give me 90 minutes. "You have 60. A half beat of silence. "Fine, 60. Don't move." The hour that followed was the hardest kind of waiting, the kind where action would feel better but would make everything worse, and knowing that does absolutely nothing to make the waiting easier. Tom went back to the lobby. Ricky fell in beside him without being asked, which was one of the things Tom valued most about Ricky Torres. The man had an instinct for when presence was needed and when space was needed, and he never got the two confused. "Morrison's attorney made a move," Tom said low. Ricky absorbed this without expression. "What kind of move?" "Challenging the visitor restriction, trying to get him back in the building tonight." Ricky was quiet for 3 seconds. "Then Marcus, working on a TIRO, 60 minutes. Ricky nodded. He looked out at the parking lot at the 100 people who had been standing, sitting and quietly occupying that space for the better part of a day now. The news van had been joined by a second one from a different affiliate, and Tom could see a reporter doing a live stand-up near the edge of the lot framed by the long rows of motorcycles behind her. Sandra talked to both of them, Ricky said. Hawk, the woman is magnificent. She told the second reporter about the 6 closed incident reports. She was careful about it, stuck to public record. Nothing that could bite us, but she said it clearly. Tom looked at him. How'd that land? Reporter's producer called the Albuquerque PD press office 20 minutes ago asking for comment. Ricky paused. The press office said they had no record of complaints. Tom felt something shift in the center of his chest. Not surprise, confirmation, which was in some ways worse than surprise. They lied. On record, to a news camera. Ricky's voice was flat and precise. Which means when Marcus's documentation comes out tomorrow and it shows 6 filed reports, there is going to be a very uncomfortable question about who said what tonight. Tom looked at the reporter. Young woman, probably late 20s, standing straight with a microphone saying something he couldn't hear. Behind her, the motorcycles stretched in their quiet rows, and behind them, the hospital rose up, and somewhere on the 3rd floor, a 14-year-old girl was asleep in a bed she hadn't asked to be in. Daniel Morrison, Tom said quietly, has spent years betting that nobody was watching. Ricky said nothing. He was right, Tom said. Until tonight. At 7:58 p.m., 2 minutes before Tom's self-imposed deadline, Marcus called. I have the TRO, he said, and the 3 words landed in Tom's ear like the sound of a lock opening. Judge Cortez signed it 11 minutes ago. Daniel Morrison is legally prohibited from entering this hospital or coming within 300 feet of Lily Morrison until after tomorrow's hearing. If he violates it, he is in contempt and subject to immediate arrest. Tom exhaled long and slow. You got Cortez. I got Cortez. And Tom, she didn't just sign it. She called me back personally after reviewing Carl's medical documentation. She said, and I am quoting directly, I want to make sure this is airtight by morning. She is taking this seriously. Does Morrison's attorney know yet? Being served as we speak, electronically and in person. Anthony Garces is good, but he's not a miracle worker. There is nothing he can do with a signed TRO from a sitting judge. A pause. It's a good night, Tom. It's a start, Tom said. It's a start, Marcus agreed. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's the harder day. Tom put the phone away and stood very still for a moment, and Ricky stood beside him, and neither of them said anything, because sometimes the right response to relief is just to let it exist without narrating it. Then Sandra appeared from across the lobby. She had a way of arriving exactly when news broke, which Tom had long since stopped finding coincidental. And she looked at his face and read it the way she read everything, which was quickly and accurately. Good news, she said. TRO, Tom said. Sandra closed her eyes briefly and pressed her fist against her sternum, a gesture Tom had seen her make before at moments that mattered to her. Then she opened her eyes and nodded firmly the way a person nods when they are refusing to feel too much relief too early because they know the morning is still coming. I'll tell the others, she said. The quiet moved through the lobby in a wave, not a cheer, not a celebration, just a settling, a collective exhale. People who had been standing with their shoulders near their ear let them drop half an inch. It was a small thing, but it was visible, and Tom watched it move through the room and felt for the first time since 2:47 a.m. that they were ahead of something rather than running to catch it. He went back upstairs. Patricia Nunez was at the nurse's station when he stepped off the elevator, and she looked at him with a question in her expression. TRO, he said. Signed and served. Patricia Nunez allowed herself a very small, very controlled smile. The kind that a professional woman who has maintained neutrality all day permits herself when the professional obligation is lifted for exactly one moment. Good, she said. That's good. Then she straightened her shoulders and was the charge nurse again. She's sleeping. Let her sleep. I will. Tom started towards the chair in the hallway outside Lily's room, which was where he intended to spend the night. Patricia's voice stopped him. Mr. Daniels? He turned. She was looking at him steadily. I've been a nurse for 28 years. I have seen a lot of things come through these doors. People in bad situations. She paused. What you all did today, coming here, it matters. Not because of the legal pressure, because she woke up this morning completely alone and she went to sleep tonight knowing that 100 people came 600 miles for her. That changes something in a person. Something important. Tom looked at her. I should have come sooner. Yes, Patricia said without cruelty and without softening it. But you came. He sat in the chair outside Lily's room and stretched his legs out and leaned his head back against the wall and did not sleep because sleep was not available to him tonight, and he had stopped pretending otherwise an hour ago. Around 10 p.m. his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. New Mexico area code different from Lily's hospital phone, Pishimo. The text said, you think you've won something. You haven't. There are people in this city who owe me. You have no idea what you've walked into. Tom read it twice. Then he forwarded it to Marcus with 3 words, document and preserve. Marcus responded in under 2 minutes. Already on it. This is now evidence of attempted intimidation of witnesses in an active family court proceeding. Thank him for me. Tom set the phone down and looked at the ceiling. He thought about what Marcus had said. You have no idea what you've walked into, and the truth was he probably didn't, not fully. A well-connected cop and his home city friends in the department, a closed network of favors owed, and debts called in. That was a real thing. That was not nothing. But here was what Daniel Morrison did not understand about the kind of people who had ridden 600 miles on a Thursday. They were not afraid of powerful men. Not because they were reckless, but because they had collectively lived through enough to know that power is not the same thing as righteousness. And righteousness, when it shows up with documentation and 97 witnesses and a signed TRO, tends to have the longer reach. It was just past midnight when the thing happened that Tom had not anticipated. Lily's door opened. He straightened immediately, hand going to his phone. But it was Lily herself who appeared in the doorway barefoot, her splinted arm held carefully against her chest, wearing a hospital gown and looking like someone who had woken up and needed to say something before she lost her nerve. I can't sleep, she said. Me neither, Tom said. Sit down before you fall down. You don't have shoes on. She sat down in the second chair next to him and pulled her knees up, which looked painful with the ribs, but she did it anyway with the focused determination of a teenager who has decided to be uncomfortable on her own terms. They sat in the hallway together in the dim nighttime hospital light, and for a while neither of them said anything. Then Lily said, I need to tell you about my mom. Tom looked at her. Lily, not for the case. I know Marcus needs me to save it for the hearing. I know that. She looked down at her hands. I need to tell somebody who knew her. Who knew her before. A pause. Before him. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he said, tell me. She was funny, Lily said. People don't think about her as funny, but she was. She had this laugh, kind of embarrassing, actually really loud. She'd cover her mouth when she did it. And she used to make these terrible puns and then laugh at her own jokes before she even finished them. Lily's voice was careful and steady, the voice of someone walking a narrow path. She used to take me to this diner on Sunday mornings. Just us, before he came. She'd let me order whatever I wanted, and we'd sit in the booth for like 2 hours just talking. I was 7, 8, 9, and she talked to me like I was a person. Not a kid, like what I thought mattered. Tom nodded. He did not speak. This was not the moment for speaking. After he came in, the Sundays stopped pretty fast. Everything kind of compressed, like the whole house got smaller somehow. She got quieter. She stopped laughing. Lily swallowed. I used to think if I was better, if I was less trouble, maybe she'd come back. The version of her that laughed. She shook her head. That's not how it works. I know that now. I know it wasn't my fault. But I was 9 and 10 and 11, and I didn't know that then. No, Tom said, you wouldn't. The night she died, Lily stopped. Her jaw worked. I was asleep. I woke up and the house was quiet the wrong way. You know, the way a house is quiet when something's wrong, not the way it's quiet when everything's fine. I went downstairs and Daniel was on the phone in the kitchen and his back was to me. He was talking quietly, too quietly. And when he heard me come in, he turned around and his face, she stopped again. His face was wrong, not sad, just wrong. Tom felt the ice water feeling from earlier come back. He told me my mom's heart had given out. that he'd gotten home and found her, that she was already gone. Lily's voice had flattened into the careful monotone of someone reporting something they have rehearsed many times in their own head. But the shirt was wet, Uncle Hawk. He'd been home for an hour. He'd had time to change everything else. But the shirt was wet. The hallway was completely silent. I think about it every single day, Lily said. Whether I'm wrong, whether I'm just a kid who lost her mom and is looking for a reason. I've thought about it from every angle. Every single angle. She looked at him. And every time I come back to the same place. The shirt, Tom said. The shirt, she said. Tom looked at his hands. He looked at them for a long time. Something was happening behind his sternum that was not something he was going to show right now, because what was happening was fury of a specific and ancient variety, the kind that comes when a person understands the full shape of a thing they have been only partially seeing, and fury right now was not useful. What was useful was this. Lily, he said slowly, what you just told me everything about that night, the timeline, the shirt, his expression, you remember all of it clearly. Every detail. I've been remembering it for a year. There are things that can be done with that information, he said, legally, properly, not just the family court case. I need you to understand what you're describing is something that a different kind of investigation looks at. She went very still. You mean like, I mean like everything gets looked at, Tom said. Everything, but only if you're willing. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Tom was starting to think she might not answer. Then she straightened slightly, and he could see in her posture something that Jake Morrison used to do, a particular kind of physical gathering, like a person collecting themselves from the inside out before they do something hard. He took everything, she said. My dad, my mom, my whole life. Her voice was not shaking. I'm not letting him keep it. Tom looked at her, this 14-year-old girl, sitting barefoot in a hospital hallway at midnight, and he felt the weight of a promise made 16 years ago lift slightly, not because it had been fulfilled not yet, but because the person he had made it for was telling him she was ready to fight. Okay, he said, then we fight. He reached for his phone. He hesitated for just 1 second. It was after midnight. It was a lot to drop on a man who had already filed 2 emergency documents before noon, and then he called Marcus anyway. Marcus answered on the second ring, which meant he hadn't been sleeping either. I need you to connect me, Tom said, with whoever handles wrongful death investigations in New Mexico. Tonight, if possible. A silence on Marcus's end. Then carefully. What did she tell you? Enough, Tom said. Enough to change what this is. Another silence. Longer. The kind that happens when a lawyer is very quickly recalibrating the size of the thing in front of him. Tom, Marcus said at last, and his voice was very quiet. Do you understand what you're asking me to do? Yes. We're not talking about family court anymore. No, Tom said. We're not. Outside the hospital, 100 motorcycles sat silent in the dark lot, and a news camera that had stayed through the night caught the light from the 3rd floor window, where Tom Daniels sat with a phone pressed to his ear and a 14-year-old girl beside him, and neither of them was going anywhere. The night was not over. The morning was going to be something else entirely. Marcus Webb did not sleep that night. Tom knew this because Marcus sent his last text at 1:47 a.m., and his first call came at 5:23 a.m., and the voice on the line had the particular wired clarity of a man who had been running on coffee and momentum for the better part of 20 hours and had somehow converted exhaustion into fuel. I reached Detective Sergeant Angela Reyes, Marcus said. New Mexico State Police Major Crimes Unit. She's independent of Albuquerque Pede that matters. I sent her what Carl documented. I sent her Lily's preliminary statement about the night Carol died, and I sent her the timeline inconsistency. A pause. She called me back in 40 minutes, Tom. 40 minutes, which tells you something. Tom was already on his feet, rolling his neck, standing in the hallway outside Lily's room, where he had spent the night in a chair that was not designed for sleeping, which was fine because he had not slept. What did she say? She said Carol Morrison's death was ruled cardiac event, natural causes, no autopsy performed because the responding officer, who happened to be a colleague and personal friend of Daniel Morrison's, indicated no signs of foul play at the scene. Marcus's voice was controlled, but there was something underneath it, a current of restrained anger that Tom recognized because it was identical to what he himself was running on. No autopsy, Tom. A 38-year-old woman with no prior cardiac history dies in her home, and nobody requested an autopsy. Tom's hand tightened on the phone. Can that be undone? In cases where new evidence suggests the original ruling was incomplete, a medical examiner can petition for exhumation and post-mortem examination. It is not a fast process. It is not a certain process. But Detective Reyes told me, and this is her exact language, that the circumstances you've described meet the threshold for opening a preliminary inquiry. Another pause. She's coming to the courthouse this morning, not for the family hearing. She wants to speak with Lily directly with your attorney and a victim's advocate present before she decides how to proceed. Tom stood very still. Does Morrison know? Not yet, and we need to keep it that way for as long as possible. The moment he finds out State Police Major Crimes is asking questions about his wife's death, everything changes. His lawyer changes strategy. He potentially lawyers up on criminal exposure, and the family hearing becomes a secondary battlefield. Marcus's voice dropped. Right now, the most important thing is that Lily walks into that courtroom this morning, and Judge Cortez hears what she has to say. Everything else, the criminal piece that comes after, in the right order. Understood, Tom said. What time do we need to be there? Hearing is at 9 a.m. I want Lily there by 8:15. She needs to be calm. She needs to be clear, and she needs to understand that she is not on trial. The burden in a family court protective custody hearing is on the petitioner, which is us, and the standard is preponderance of evidence, which means more likely than not. With Carl's documentation, the 6 closed reports, and Lily's own statement, we are well above that standard. I need her to know that walking in. Tom looked at Lily's door. I'll tell her. One more thing, Marcus said. Lily's maternal grandparents, Carol's parents, a couple named Frank and Dolores Vega. I reached them last night. They're driving in from Santa Fe this morning. They want to testify. Tom paused. Do they know about the inquiry into Carol's death? Not yet, but Frank Vega told me something last night that you need to know. Marcus took a breath. He said that 2 weeks before Carol died, she called her mother and told her she was afraid, that she had been thinking about leaving, that she didn't know how. His voice was very quiet. Dolores kept it to herself because Daniel was law enforcement and she was afraid of what he could do. She has been carrying that for a year. The hallway was silent. Tom closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Get them here, he said. He knocked on Lily's door at 6 a.m. and she was already awake, sitting up in bed with the television off and the kind of alert, watchful expression that people develop when they have spent years listening for the sound of footsteps. Big day, Tom said. I know. She looked at him steadily. Tell me what's happening. All of it. Don't leave things out because you think I can't handle them. Tom pulled the chair close and told her. He told her about Detective Reyes and the inquiry. He told her about her grandparents driving from Santa Fe. He told her what Marcus had said about the hearing standard and what it meant for her. He told her clearly and without softening the edges, because she had asked him not to soften the edges and she had earned the right to that request. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Grandma Dolores is coming, she said. Should be here by 8. Something moved across her face, a brief involuntary flash of something young and undefended before she pulled it back under control. I haven't seen her since the funeral. Daniel didn't like us going over there. He said she put ideas in my head. What kind of ideas? Lily looked at him. That I deserved better, she said. The simplicity of it hit Tom somewhere low and direct. He didn't respond immediately because the right response to something that simple and that devastating is not a quick one. Dolores Vega, he said finally, sounds like a woman with good ideas. For just a moment, Lily almost smiled. Patricia Nunez came in at 7 to help Lily get ready, practical and efficient and kind in the exact proportions the moment required. Carl had cleared Lily for discharge with a follow-up care plan, and Tom waited in the hallway while the nurses managed the morning routine, and while he waited, he went downstairs and walked through the lobby and out to the parking lot. It was a cool October morning, the air carrying that particular clarity that the desert gets after dark, and the 100 motorcycles still sat in their rows. Most of the riders had slept in shifts, some in their sleeping bags near their bikes, some in their trucks and vans, a few in the cheap motel 2 blocks down, whose owner had come out the previous evening, looked at the situation, and offered block rates without being asked. Arturo had organized a coffee run at 5 a.m., and people were standing in groups with cups in their hands, and when Tom walked out, the conversations didn't stop. But the awareness of him moved through the group the way it always did, a subtle collective noting, a quiet readiness. Ricky materialized beside him. "How's she doing?" "She's strong," Tom said. "Stronger than she should have to be." "Any movement on Morrison's end?" "Not yet." Tom looked at the morning sky. "He knows the TRO is in place and he knows the hearing is at 9. What I don't know is what move Garces advised him to make." As if on cue, Tom's phone rang. Marcus. "Morrison's attorney contacted the court 40 minutes ago," Marcus said, and his voice had an edge to it that told Tom this was not good news. "Garces filed a motion to continue the hearing. He's claiming that his client needs additional time to gather evidence, refuting the custody petition." Tom stopped walking. "Can he get a continuance?" "He can request one. Whether Cortez grants it is another question. A continuance would push the hearing back potentially days, possibly more than a week, and in the interim, the TRO stands, but guardianship reverts to Morrison's status quo." A tight pause. "Tom, if Cortez grants this continuance, Lily cannot stay in the hospital indefinitely. She would need placement, and if Morrison still holds legal guardianship, he can petition for her return," Tom finished. "Yes." The cold that moved through Tom now was a different quality than before. This was not the cold of revelation. This was the cold of a man watching a door he thought was closed creak open. "What are the odds Cortez grants it?" he asked. "Normally in a standard hearing, reasonable. Judges grant continuance regularly, but this is not a standard hearing because of what Carl documented, because of the 6 reports, and because—" Marcus paused. "Because Detective Reyes called Cortez's clerk this morning, professionally, formally. She informed the court that there is an active preliminary inquiry by State Police Major Crimes that is directly relevant to the subject matter of this hearing." Tom absorbed this. "Will that hold Cortez?" "It gave her legal grounds to deny the continuance if she chooses. Whether she chooses, that's Renata Cortez, and Renata Cortez is someone who does not like her courtroom used as a delay tactic." A brief silence. "I'll know in the next hour. Get Lily ready to go." Frank and Dolores Vega arrived at the hospital at 7:40 a.m. in a silver sedan that had driven hard from Santa Fe and parked crooked in its space in a way that told you they had not slowed down as much as they probably should have. Tom saw them coming across the parking lot, and he recognized them immediately. Frank was a compact, weathered man in his late 60s who moved like someone who had spent his life doing physical work, and Dolores was small and dark-haired and was already crying before she reached the door, which she was clearly furious at herself about, pressing the back of her hand to her mouth as she walked. Tom met them at the entrance. Dolores Vega looked at him and then, without any preamble or introduction, said, "Is she all right?" "She's better than she was yesterday," Tom said. "She's getting ready now." Dolores pressed her lips together and nodded very fast several times. Frank Vega extended his hand and Tom shook it, and the old man held the grip a beat longer than a standard handshake, the way men do when they are communicating something that they can't quite find the words for in the moment. "Mr. Daniels," Frank said, "my wife told me about you, what Jake said about you." He paused. "Thank you for coming." "I should have come sooner," Tom said for the second time in 12 hours. It was becoming something close to a mantra. "Yes," Frank said the same way Patricia Nunez had said it, honest, not cruel. "But here we are." They went upstairs. The moment Dolores Vega walked into room 314 and saw Lily, she made a sound that was very small and very sharp, like something breaking cleanly, and then she crossed the room in 3 steps and put her arms around the girl with the careful urgency of someone who has been waiting a very long time to do exactly this. Lily went rigid for just a moment, the flinch of a person whose body has learned that contact precedes pain, and then something in her released, and she leaned into her grandmother, and Tom looked at the wall, and Frank Vega looked at the ceiling, and both of them found something very interesting to observe in those directions for a moment. "I'm sorry, mija," Dolores was saying, quiet and fierce. I'm so sorry. I should have pushed harder. I should have come for you. I was afraid of him, and I let that stop me, and I will spend the rest of my life. Grandma, Lily said, muffled against the older woman's shoulder. Grandma, stop. You're here now. Tom stepped into the hallway. Behind him, he heard Frank Vega say gruffly, She's right, Dolores. We're here now. And Dolores make the sound of a woman who is not yet ready to stop apologizing, but is willing to table it temporarily. In the hallway, Tom stood with his back against the wall and let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere very deep. His phone buzzed. Marcus Cortez denied the continuance. Hearing proceeds at 9 a.m. Get here. The Bernalillo County Family Courthouse was 7 minutes from the hospital. Tom rode in the car with Lily and her grandparents, Frank driving with the focused intensity of a man who has been given a purpose after a year of helplessness. Behind them, not all 100, but a deliberate and carefully discussed 15 of Tom's people rode in formation far enough back to be respectful of the court setting, close enough to be visible to anyone watching. It had been Sandra's idea. We don't need 100 bikes outside a courthouse, we need 15. Enough to be seen, not enough to be a story. Tom had agreed. Sandra was almost always right. Lily sat in the back seat between Tom and Dolores. She was in the clean clothes Dolores had brought from Santa Fe, and she was holding her grandmother's hand, and she was looking out the window with an expression that Tom recognized from the previous night, the gathering expression, the collecting herself expression, Jake Morrison's expression. You're going to be okay in there, Tom said quietly. I know, Lily said. Then I'm still scared. Being scared and being okay aren't different things, Tom said. They happen at the same time. She looked at him. Is that something my dad used to say? No, Tom said. That's something I learned from watching him. She turned back to the window. After a moment, she said, I'm ready. The courtroom was smaller than the drama of the situation seemed to warrant, which was always true of family courts. They handled enormous things in ordinary rooms, and there was something both humbling and quietly appropriate about that. Judge Renata Cortez was 54 years old with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she had the specific quality of authority that comes not from position, but from absolute consistency. Everyone in the legal community knew that what Judge Cortez said she would do, she did, and what she said she would not tolerate, she did not tolerate. Daniel Morrison was already seated at the respondent's table with Anthony Garces beside him when Tom walked in with Lily and the Vega family. Garces was mid-50s expensive suit, the practiced calm of a man who has won cases he should have lost and knows how to project that history into a room. Morrison himself was in a dark suit and his jaw was set, and he did not look at Lily when she walked in. Lily looked at him. Tom watched her do it. She looked at her stepfather directly for a long and deliberate 3 seconds, the way you look at something you are deciding to stop being afraid of. Then she looked away and sat down beside her grandmother and did not look at him again. Marcus leaned over to Tom the moment they were seated. Reyes is in the gallery, he said quietly. Back right, don't turn around. Tom didn't turn around. He filed the information away. Judge Cortez opened the hearing with the efficient directness of someone who had read the entire file the previous evening and was not interested in being walked through things she already knew. She acknowledged the TRO, noted the medical documentation, noted the pending inquiry that had been communicated by state police, and then looked at Anthony Garces over her reading glasses. Counselor, she said, your client's motion for continuance was denied. We are proceeding. Do you have an opening statement? Garces stood. He was smooth. Tom had to give him that. He acknowledged the injuries, expressed his client's deep concern for his stepdaughter's well-being, suggested that the injuries, however serious, were consistent with the reported mechanism, and argued that removing a child from her legal guardian based on preliminary documentation and the presence of interested parties who arrived on motorcycles constituted an extraordinary intervention that required extraordinary evidence. He used the word motorcycles twice in 3 minutes. Tom noted it without reacting. Marcus stood and addressed it in his first sentence. Your Honor, I'll note that the riding habits of concerned citizens have no bearing on the medical documentation before this court, the closed incident reports filed with Albuquerque PD, or the testimony of the individuals prepared to speak today. I'd ask that we focus on the evidence. Cortez looked at Garces. Agreed. Mr. Garces, the petitioner's transportation choices are not relevant. Move on. Garces moved on, but something had shifted in the room, a barely perceptible tipping, and Tom felt it the way you feel a change in wind before you can name the direction. Carl Reeves testified first. He was precise, clinical, and devastating. He walked the court through every injury with the unhurried authority of a man who has testified in exactly this kind of proceeding before and understands that clarity is the most powerful thing in a room where one side wants confusion. The defensive fracture pattern on the wrist, the healed evidence of 3 prior trauma events, the internal imaging. When Garces cross-examined him, Carl answered every question in the same measured tone and did not give an inch on a single clinical conclusion. Garces tried twice. The second time, Cortez intervened. Counsel, the witness has answered this question. Move to a new line of questioning or conclude your cross. Garces concluded his cross. Then Dolores Vega took the stand. Tom had not fully anticipated Dolores Vega on the witness stand. He had thought of her as a supporting presence, a loving grandmother who would confirm what they already knew. What he had not accounted for was that Dolores Vega was 70 years old and had been carrying a terrible thing for a year and was now in a room where she had been given permission to put it down. She was calm. She was precise. She was absolutely immovable. She described Carol's phone call 2 weeks before her death. She repeated her daughter's words from memory. "Mama, I'm scared. I've been thinking about leaving, but I don't know how, and I don't know if he would let me." Her voice did not shake when she said it. She had cried all she was going to cry in the car on the way over. What was left was something cleaner and harder. Garces's cross-examination of Dolores Vega lasted 4 minutes, because by minute 3, there was no jury, it was a judge alone, but the principle applied. The room had turned in a way that a competent attorney knows means it is time to stop making things worse. Then Marcus said, "Your Honor, I'd like to call Lily Morrison." The room went quiet in a specific way. Morrison moved just slightly in his chair, and Garces put a hand on his arm. Lily stood up. Tom caught her eye. She gave him one short nod, the gathering nod, the Jake Morrison nod, and walked to the stand. Marcus led her through it gently and thoroughly. The years of incidents, the fear that was the background noise of her daily life, the things she had tried to report, and the consequences she had faced for trying. She spoke in the clear, careful voice of someone who has rehearsed something, not to recite it, but to survive it, to say it out loud in a room full of people, and come out the other side still standing. When she described the night her mother died, the room went very still. The wet shirt, the timeline, his face, the things that didn't add up and had never added up, and that she had been carrying alone for a year. Marcus had coached her carefully. This was not the criminal inquiry. This was family court she was establishing. Context for the protective order, not making prosecutorial arguments. She stayed within those lines with a precision that made Tom proud in a way that surprised him with its intensity. When she finished, Marcus said, "No further questions." Garces stood slowly. He looked at Lily on the stand. He looked at Cortez. He looked at his notepad. The calculation happening behind his eyes was visible to anyone who knew what to look for. How much damage does further examination do versus how much does declining do, and which number is smaller? "No questions, Your Honor," he said. Lily stepped down from the stand and walked back to her seat, and when she sat down next to Dolores, her grandmother took her hand and held it and did not let go. Tom looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back at him. Neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. Judge Cortez removed her reading glasses and set them on the bench in front of her with a quiet, deliberate precision that told the room she was about to say something she had already fully decided. "I've reviewed this matter thoroughly," she said. Her voice was even, and it carried. "The documentation before this court establishes by more than a preponderance of evidence that Lily Morrison has been subjected to a sustained pattern of physical harm within her home. The medical findings are not in dispute. The prior reports, 6 of them, indicate a pattern that should have triggered investigation and did not, which is a separate matter. This court is referring to the appropriate oversight body." She looked briefly toward the back of the room, toward Tom, soon where Detective Reyes was sitting, and then back to the center. "I am granting full emergency protective custody to Frank and Dolores Vega, effective immediately. Daniel Morrison's guardianship rights are suspended pending the outcome of further proceedings. He is to have no contact with Lily Morrison directly or indirectly until this court orders otherwise." She set down her papers. This court is also formally requesting that the New Mexico State Police Major Crimes Unit provide this court with regular status updates regarding their preliminary inquiry. If that inquiry produces findings relevant to this minor's well-being or safety, this court will act accordingly. She looked at Garces. Counselor, I trust your client understands the full scope of the situation he is now in. Garces said nothing, which was its own answer. Cortez looked at Lily directly over the top of everything, the lawyers, the tables, the formality of the room. Young lady, she said, you were very brave today, and I want you to know that this court sees you. Lily looked at the judge. Her chin was steady. Her eyes were bright. Thank you, she said. Morrison stood up abruptly, and Garces grabbed his arm with both hands. The motion was quick, physical, the motion of an attorney preventing a client from doing something that could not be undone. Morrison's face was a controlled fury, trying very hard to find somewhere to go. He looked at Tom. Tom looked back at him from across the room with an expression that contained nothing threatening, nothing triumphant, just the quiet, permanent certainty of a man who had placed himself between a predator and a child and was not moving. Morrison looked away first. In the gallery behind them, Tom heard the soft sound of someone releasing a long breath. Sandra, he thought, or perhaps Ricky, or perhaps it was Detective Angela Reyes who had sat in the back of that room and listened to a 14-year-old girl describe the night her mother died and was already building something in her mind that would not stop building until it was finished. Outside the courthouse, 15 motorcycles started their engines, and Lily Morrison, for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember, walked out of a room she had walked into afraid, and she was free. The 15 motorcycles outside the courthouse were not celebrating. That was the first thing a person noticed. There was no noise, no revving, no performance. Just 15 engines turning over in the October morning air, and 15 people who had been sitting with held breath, finally allowed to breathe, doing so quietly, the way people breathe after something real. Lily walked out of the courthouse between her grandparents and stopped on the pub step. The sun hit her face and she closed her eyes for exactly 1 second, not dramatically, not for anyone watching, but the way a person does when something they weren't sure they'd ever feel again finds them. Warmth, open air, the specific feeling of a door closing behind you that you never have to walk back through. Tom stopped beside her. He didn't say anything. He had learned in the last 36 hours that Lily Morrison did not need words placed into her silences. She needed someone to stand in them with her. After a moment, she opened her eyes and looked at him. Is it always like that? She asked. After something like that. Does it always feel like this? Like what? She thought about it. Like it happened and also like it's still happening. At the same time. Yeah, Tom said. That's how it feels. She nodded slowly, processing it. Then Frank Vega put his hand on her shoulder, and she leaned into it slightly, and the four of them walked down the steps together toward the waiting bikes. Sandra was the first one to reach her. She didn't make a speech. She just put both hands on Lily's face the way older women do when they are looking at someone they have been fighting for. And she said, you did that. Nobody did that for you. You did it. And Lily's careful composure cracked just slightly at the edges, the way it had been threatening to crack since the moment Dolores walked into the hospital room, and this time she let it go a little further before she pulled it back, which Tom took as a good sign, the slow incremental permission a person gives themselves to feel things again after a very long time of not being allowed to. Ricky shook Tom's hand without words, which between them was equivalent to a long speech. Arturo said, green chile cheeseburgers for everyone, which got the first real laugh out of Tom in 2 days, and it surprised him enough that he laughed harder than the joke warranted, which was its own kind of release. They were standing in the courthouse parking lot, the loose and easy gathering of people who have done something hard together and are letting the tension unwind, when Marcus appeared at Tom's elbow. With his phone in one hand and his file folder in the other, and an expression on his face that Tom recognized as the expression Marcus wore when he was about to deliver news that was not simple. Walk with me a minute, Marcus said. Tom fell in beside him, and they moved away from the group far enough for privacy. Reyes called me, Marcus said. He kept his voice low and even. 30 minutes ago, while we were still in the courtroom. Tom looked at him. She ran the timeline Lily described against the hospital's own intake records from the night Carol died. The hospital logs Morrison's arrival at the emergency department at 2:57 a.m. The attending nurse's note, which has been sitting in a file for a year without anyone looking at it carefully, records that he was, quote, agitated and damp as if he had been outside. Her words. She wrote it down and then nothing happened with it because nobody asked. Tom stopped walking. Reyes requested the medical examiner's original file this morning. Marcus continued. The ME who ruled natural causes did so without a full autopsy on the basis of the responding officer's report. The responding officer was a 14-year veteran of Albuquerque PD who has received commendations signed by Daniel Morrison on 3 separate occasions. He paused. Reyes is calling it a compromise scene assessment. She's filing for formal exhumation authorization today. The world was very quiet around Tom for a moment. The parking lot sounds the engines, the conversation Lily laughing at something Arturo said receded slightly, and what he heard instead was a 14-year-old girl's voice in a hospital hallway at midnight. I don't think her heart just stopped by itself. She was right, Tom said. It wasn't a question. We don't know that yet. Not legally, not scientifically, not until the examination is done. Marcus looked at him directly. But the probability that this is going to become a criminal matter, a serious criminal matter, went up significantly in the last hour. Tom looked back at Lily across the parking lot. She was talking to Sandra, and whatever Sandra was saying was making her gesture with her good hand explaining something, and for one unguarded moment, her face was just a 14-year-old's face. Not the careful, contained face of someone managing perpetual fear, but something more natural and more young and more what she should have been allowed to be all along. Does she need to know this today? Tom asked. Marcus considered it. Not today. Reyes will approach her formally with advocates present when the investigation is formally opened. She knows to do it right. He paused. But Tom, when that happens, and it will happen, Lily is going to need to be prepared for this to get bigger. Louder. Morrison is going to fight it. His department is going to circle. This is going to be a very long road. She can handle it, Tom said. Marcus looked at him. How sure are you? Tom watched Lily across the lot. She had turned to Frank Vega and was saying something to him, and Frank was listening with that focused, weathered attention of a man who has decided he is not missing another word, this child says. She called a stranger at 2:47 in the morning, Tom said quietly, because she decided she was done being afraid. That's not something that breaks easily, Marcus. That's the kind of thing that gets stronger. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then you sound like you know. Tom said nothing, which was its own answer. They were 20 minutes into the drive back toward the hospital. Lily needed to complete her discharge paperwork and collect the few things she'd brought when Tom's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go. Then he answered. The voice on the other end was male, middle-aged, carrying the specific, careful flatness of someone who was either very controlled by nature or was working very hard at it in this moment. Mr. Daniels, my name is Lieutenant Hector Cruz. I'm with Albuquerque PD Internal Affairs. Tom's hand tightened on the phone. Lieutenant, I want to be straightforward with you. I'm aware of this morning's family court ruling. I'm aware of the state police inquiry. And I want you to know that there is a process underway inside this department independent of the Morrison situation regarding the handling of the 6 complaint reports that were filed and closed without investigation. A careful pause. I'm not calling to ask you for anything. I'm calling because I felt you deserved to know that not everyone in this department is what Daniel Morrison represented. Some of us have been watching what you did in the last 36 hours and we understand what it was. Tom was very still for a moment. He had not expected this call. He filed it alongside everything else he was carrying and made sure his voice was even when he said, I appreciate you telling me that, Lieutenant. There are going to be consequences internally, Cruz said, for Morrison obviously, but also for the officer who closed those reports, and for the officer who responded to the scene when Carol Morrison died. Those processes are slow. I won't pretend otherwise. But they are moving. Thank you, Tom said. He hung up and sat in the quiet of the car Frank was driving again. Dolores and Lily in the back, Lily with her head resting against her grandmother's shoulder, in the way of someone who has decided at least for this car ride to allow themselves to be held, and he thought about what Cruz had said. Some of us have been watching. Not everyone is what Morrison represented. It was not absolution for a system that had failed a child for years, but it was something. It was a crack in the wall that everything else, Reyes's inquiry, Marcus's filings, the 6 reports now in the hands of oversight, would work its way through. He looked out the window and let it settle. The discharge from the hospital took an hour. Patricia Nunez managed the paperwork herself, and when it was done, she walked with Lily to the lobby, and at the door she stopped and looked at the girl and said, "You come back and see us okay when things are better. You come back and tell us how you're doing." And Lily looked at this woman who had stood between her and a locked door for 36 hours and said, "I will, I promise." And Patricia Nunez nodded briskly and went back to work because Patricia Nunez was a professional and the lobby was not the place for the moment that was clearly requiring significant effort to contain behind those efficient eyes. Outside, the remaining riders who had stayed through the morning were preparing to head back. There were still nearly 80 of them. Some had left at dawn. Obligations of the everyday world, asserting themselves, in kids and lives that didn't pause for 60-minute notice. But the ones who had stayed were gathered in the loose, easy way of people who have been together long enough that the formality has worn off and what's left is just the fact of each other. Tom walked the line one more time. Dennis, the history teacher, who was going to have a very interesting Monday, explaining to his students why he'd missed 2 days of school. Arturo, who had called his foreman at 6 a.m. and said simply, "I need 2 more days." And the foreman had said, "Is it something important?" And Arturo had said, "Yeah." And the foreman had said, "Okay." Sandra, who was talking to Lily near the entrance with the focused, purposeful energy of a woman who had identified a kindred spirit and was not wasting a single minute of the time she had with her. Tom stopped in front of Sandra and Lily. Sandra looked at him and read his expression and said, "I was just telling her that if she ever needs anything, and I mean anything, she has my number now. All 100 of us, basically." Lily looked at Tom. "She gave me a list," she said, "an actual written list." "Sandra makes lists," Tom said. "It has names and phone numbers and what each person does for a living." Lily held it up. "There's a doctor, 2 lawyers, a contractor, a teacher. In case you need a tutor," Dennis called from somewhere to Tom's left without looking up from his phone. "In case I need a tutor," Lily repeated. And she was smiling now, a real one, the kind that reached her eyes, the kind Tom had been waiting to see since he walked into room 314 the previous afternoon. He looked at that smile and he thought, there you are. The moment that Tom had not planned for and had not anticipated came at 1:15 in the afternoon when the bikes were mostly loaded and Frank and Dolores were packing the car and Marcus was on a call and Ricky was coordinating the ride back and Lily appeared beside Tom while he was standing near his bike, running through the habit of pre-ride checks that 20 years of riding had made automatic. "Uncle Hawk," she said. He looked up. She was standing with her arms slightly crossed, not defensively, but the way a person stands when they are trying to hold something in while they find the right words for it. Her splinted wrist rested against her opposite elbow. She looked at his bike, then at him. "What happens now?" she asked. "I mean with you. Do you just go back to Tucson?" Tom straightened. He hadn't fully thought about how to have this conversation. He had been so focused on every immediate thing, the legal steps, the medical documentation, the hearing, the calls, that the question of after had not been given its proper space. "I go back to Tucson," he said, "but I want you to hear what that means and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean I disappear. That's finished. That version of things may end on." She looked at him steadily. "You said that before, about things being done." "I know. I need it to actually be true this time." "I know," he said again, "and I'm not going to stand here and ask you to just take my word for it. You're too smart for that, and you've had too many people tell you things that turned out not to be true." He leaned against the bike and looked at her. "What I'm going to do is show up, consistently. Not perfectly. I'm going to miss things. Sometimes I'm going to get it wrong, sometimes because that's what people actually do. But I'm going to show up, every time I say I will. And when I can't, I'll tell you in advance. That's what I can promise you, and that's the only promise I'm going to make because it's the only one I can keep for certain." Lily was quiet for a moment. "That's a very specific promise," she said. "Specific promises are the only kind worth making." She looked down at the ground, then back up. "My dad would have liked how you're doing this. He hated when people overpromised." Tom felt the back of his throat tighten again, the same way it had in room 314, the same quiet ambush of feeling. Yeah, he said. He had good instincts about people. He had good instincts about you, she said. Tom looked at her. 14 years old, broken wrist, 3 healed traumas in her body that nobody had stopped in time. Standing in a hospital parking lot in the October sun, having a conversation that no kid should need to have. And behind all of that, clear and direct and unmistakably alive, Jake Morrison's eyes looking at Tom with the particular quality of looking that says, I see you. I'm deciding whether to trust you. Don't waste it. I'm going to come back, Tom said. 2 weeks from now. I'll check in every few days before that. You have my number, you use it whenever you need to. Day or night, you already know I answer at 2 a.m. She almost laughed. You really do. Goes with the life. She uncrossed her arms and extended her good hand. Tom looked at it for half a second, a handshake formal, a deliberate the gesture of someone who has decided that words are insufficient and something more solid is required, and then he shook it. Her grip was firm. Jake Morrison's grip. Deal, she said. Deal, he said. Deal. The ride back to Tucson took 7 hours. Tom rode at the front, the same position he had held on the way out 2 days ago, but the internal weather was different. On the way out, he had been running from something, from 16 years of a broken promise, from the voice of a girl in pain, from the image of Jake's face in a cigar box. On the way back, he was not running. He was carrying something, and it was heavy, but it was the weight of things that matter rather than things that haunt. And the difference between those two is everything. Around the 4th hour, somewhere in the long open stretch of New Mexico highway, where the distance goes as far as you can see, and then further, Ricky pulled up alongside him. They rode parallel for a few miles, which between them meant, I'm here if you want to talk. Tom glanced over. Ricky glanced back. Tom shook his head once slowly. Not yet. Ricky nodded and fell back, because that was the language they had built over 30 years, and it had never needed translation. Tom thought about Daniel Morrison. He thought about what was moving toward that man, the state police inquiry, the internal affairs review, the exhumation request, the family court ruling that had stripped him of every legal claim to Lily's life. He thought about the particular quality of a man like that, who had operated for years in the certainty that his badge and his connections and the silence of the people around him were a wall that nothing could break through. He thought about what it must feel like for that wall to be coming down brick by brick, in public, documented and witnessed and recorded. He did not feel triumphant about it. He felt something quieter and more durable. He felt that the right thing was happening, slowly and imperfectly, the way right things always happen in the real world through lawyers and judges and nurses who write careful notes and detectives who call back in 40 minutes. And old women who have been carrying terrible things for a year and are finally allowed to put them down. He thought about Lily's voice on the phone at 2:47 in the morning. He thought about how close she had come to not making that call. How many nights before that night she had lain in the dark turning it over. Who could she call? Would anyone come? Would it make things worse? He thought about the version of events in which she had talked herself out of it, decided it was too much to ask, gone back to silence. The version where nobody came. That version was the one that lived in his chest now as a weight he intended to keep. Not guilt. Guilt is about what you feel, and he had used up his allocation of guilt in the parking lot of that hospital, in the hallway of that courthouse, at the graveside of a man he had loved. What he carried now was something more useful. It was the knowledge, specific and permanent, of what happens when someone stops waiting to be asked and just shows up. 3 weeks after the hearing, Detective Angela Reyes held a press conference. Tom watched it on his phone, standing in his kitchen in Tucson at 7 in the morning with coffee that was actually hot for once. Reyes was composed and direct, the way she had sounded on the phone with Marcus. The kind of law enforcement professional who speaks carefully because she understands that careless words in her position are weapons that go off in the wrong direction. The exhumation had been completed. The forensic pathologist's findings, she said, were inconsistent with the original ruling of natural cardiac death. A full criminal investigation into the death of Carol Morrison was now open. Daniel Morrison had been placed on administrative suspension pending the outcome. 2 other officers, the one who had responded to the scene and the one who had closed the final incident report, were under internal review. Tom set the coffee down. He picked up his phone and sent a text to Marcus. watching it now. Marcus responded, "She's going to be okay, Tom." Tom thought about that for a moment. Then he typed back, "She already is." He put the phone down and looked at the cigar box on the top shelf. Jake Morrison, at 22, grinning into a summer that no longer existed, squinting at something only he could see. Tom looked at that photograph for a long time. "We're not done," he said quietly, "but we're doing it." He picked up his phone again and typed a text to a contact listed in his phone as Lily M. added there 48 hours ago, the same night she called him, as though some part of him had known before the call came that it was going to come eventually. The text said, "Good morning, saw the news. You doing okay?" Her response came 40 seconds later, which told him she was already awake, which was either a good sign or a sign that she was still sleeping badly, and either way, it meant she was reachable, which was what mattered. "Yeah," she wrote. "Grandma made pancakes. Grandpa cried a little watching the news, but said he had something in his eye." Tom read it twice. Then he typed back, "Classic." She sent a single laughing emoji, which was, he understood, significant, the kind of insignificant thing that is actually enormous when you know what it costs someone to get to the place where laughing at something small is available to them again. He held the phone for a moment after that. Outside his window, Tucson was waking up in the ordinary way of a city with no idea what the people in it have been carrying. Traffic starting, dogs barking, the particular color of morning that this desert does better than anywhere else Tom had ever been. He put on his jacket. He went out to his bike, and he carried forward the only things worth carrying, a kept promise, a living girl, and the absolute unwavering knowledge that showing up, even late, even imperfect, even on no sleep with 600 miles behind you, is never, not once, the wrong choice. Jake Morrison had known that. He had known it when he grabbed Tom's arm on a Tuesday porch and made him say the words out loud, not because he doubted Tom, but because some promises need to be spoken to be real. And Jake Morrison had always understood the difference between what people intend and what they actually do. Tom had intended for 16 years. Now he was doing. And the girl who had called him at 2:47 in the morning, the girl who had decided in the dark, and the pain and the fear that one more night of silence was one more night too many, was eating pancakes at her grandmother's table in Santa Fe, watching the news and beginning slowly the long and real and irreplaceable work of learning what it feels like to be safe. That was not the end of everything. There would be hearings and proceedings and long, difficult months and a criminal trial that would ask more of Lily than anyone should be asked to give. There would be nights when the fear came back wearing new clothes and days when the progress felt invisible. There would be work hard and ongoing and sometimes very lonely, but she would not do it alone. And that single fact, earned across 36 hours and 600 miles by 100 people who chose to show up, was the thing that changed everything. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who rides when you call. It's who stands in the lobby and doesn't move. It's who sits in a hospital hallway at midnight and says, "I'm not going anywhere." It's who keeps the promise even when it's 16 years late, because late is not the same as never, and never is the only version of this story that was never an option. Tom Daniels started his engine, and he rode forward into the ordinary morning carrying a kept promise like a light.